Welcome to the Virtual Memories Show. I'm your host, Gil Roth, and you're listening to a weekly podcast about books and life, not necessarily in that order. You can subscribe to the Virtual Memories Show on iTunes, or use our RSS feed with your favorite podcatcher. You can find the RSS feed on our websites, vmspod.com or chimeraobscura.com/VM. We're also on Twitter at VMSPod, on Facebook at facebook.com/virtualmemoriesshow, and on Tumblr at virtualmemoriespodcast.tumblr.com. You can support this podcast and get access to exclusive content with a recurring monthly donation via Patreon. Just visit patreon.com/VMSpod and set up your level of support. Every week you'll get new material from our patron-only blog, and you'll also get to listen to my monthly bonus podcast, Fear of a Square Planet, which features extra material from our guests and is only available to supporters of the show. So visit patreon.com/VMSpod and patronize me. Now, speaking of patronizing me, the Virtual Memories Show has its first sponsor. I know, I find that hard to believe too, but the American Bystander is a new quarterly print-only humor magazine, and it's got an insane lineup of contributors. I got turned on to the Bystander by past podcast Merrill Marco, who invited me to help crowdfund the mag. By invited, she, put my email on a big group email list. But anyway, I consider that an invitation, So I looked over the Kickstarter for issue number 2. I plotzed over the incredible lineup they had. So I ponied up. They sent issue number 1. I'm eagerly awaiting issue number 2. In spirit, it's kind of like the old National Lampoon magazine, but the format's different. The humor is not quite so acid or mean-spirited, and it's a print-only humor magazine in 2016. I mean, we talk about quixotic gestures on this podcast, but launching something like that, 148 pages for the first issue, that's pretty amazing. Tilting at windmills, So the American Bystander is edited by Brian McConaughey, a great National Lampoon veteran, Alan Goldberg, and Michael Gerber. And the lineup includes some familiar names to my listeners, like Roz Chast, Merrill Marco, who I mentioned, Peter Cooper, and Mimi Pond. Plus, there are a bunch of people I'm hoping to get on the show in future. Some of the other great contributors they have, like I'm going through the contributor page: Jack Handy, Rick Geary, Sherry Flanagan, Ken Crimstein, Arnold Roth, Kate Beaton, Al Jean, I'm not sure, the guy from The Simpsons, George Meyer, Terry Jones, Liza Donnelly, Michael Ian Black, Emily Flake, Edward Sorrell, Rick Meyerowitz. There's a ton of talent in the Bystander. And again, these guys are putting out a print-only humor magazine in a day and age where everybody's fleeing from print. We're all doing our cute little funny pieces on the internet. This is really an accomplishment. The first issue was fantastic. Can't wait to get the second issue. I'm really glad that Merrill connected us and that Michael Gerber, one of the editors, likes the podcast enough to look at sponsoring what I'm doing here. So to get the first 2 issues and to help support the American Bystander as it continues, visit americanbystander.org. They're also on Twitter at Bystander Tweets. And if you go to the New York Times, look up American Bystander, because they got this really amazing write-up on July 12th that's that kind of echoes some of what I'm talking about here. It is a rare bird, and I'm awfully happy to be part of this project. So again, that's the American Bystander, and you can find out more at americanbystander.org. Now, speaking of the incredible lineup that the American Bystander has, this week's guest is one of those contributors, the great cartoonist M.K. Brown. This is the last of the shows I recorded during my San Francisco trip for the annual Bio conference back in June. You longtime listeners know that I try to tie in the business travel with a couple of podcast opportunities, and I was awfully glad to set this one up. MK lives in Fairfax, California, which is this gorgeous country town about 30 minutes from San Francisco. I got to drive over the Golden Gate Bridge, through the Robin Williams Tunnel, had a nice time kind of chilling out in the little commerce area of town before heading over to her place. MK is a really amazing cartoonist and artist, and I think she's a little like Roz Chast in not quite realizing how many other people really, really dig their work. In Roz's case, she really poo-pooed the idea that people went nuts when I said I'm going to interview Roz Chast for the podcast. In the same way, and this comes up during our conversation, the number of artists and cartoonists who plots when I said I'm going to record with MK Brown, it was pretty high, pretty significant figures who had that reaction. She is very, very well regarded in cartooning circles, but doesn't do an awful lot of press. I don't necessarily consider myself press, but we'll fake it for the sake of the podcast. Anyway, so I went up, we sat down, we had some coffee, we talked for a while. The conversation is a little tentative and weird compared to some of the more forthcoming ones that I've had. It was just a feel for how the conversation went. I will say MK and I talked for about 2 more hours after I put the mics away. Really good, fun conversation that kind of spun off of a lot of the things we talk about here. Sorry you guys don't get to hear that part, but that's the nature of how this stuff goes. I think we probably need to sit down again in a year or two and talk more. But I'm really glad that MK invited me into her home and let me sit down with her to do this. I always actually kind of marvel over the fact that people do that. It's weird to let some schlub from New Jersey whom you've never met into your home with a couple of microphones. Although it's not quite as weird as when I was in grad school and I had a job serving summons to people. Because at that point, I was a 6'1" gork, about 20 pounds lighter than I am now with a shaved head. And still, people thought it was just fine to let me into their homes in the middle of the day to tell me about like the possible whereabouts of someone I was trying to serve. It's a funny world. But that's neither here nor there. What's important is I got to sit down with a great artist whose work I've loved and talk with her about her life and her art. So here is the bio that MK sent over. MK Brown is an artist whose work has appeared in most national magazines and collections since the 70s, and in many forms such as cartoons, animation, and illustration. MK grew up in Darien, Connecticut, and New Brunswick, Canada, and attended art schools in New Canaan, GTO, Mexico, and San Francisco, California. After selling cartoons to small publications like The Realist, her work was published in Playboy magazine, then in National Lampoon, where her cartoons were featured for several decades. Aside from Playboy and National Lampoon, Brown's cartoons and illustrations were published in Mother Jones magazine, The Atlantic Monthly, Women's Sports, Arcade Comics, The New Yorker, and many other magazines, both mainstream and underground. She collaborated with Brian McConaughey, Bill Murray, Peter Elbling, and Brian Doyle Murray to write TV's first scripted comedy hour for NBC, and later created an animated series for the first season of The Tracey Ullman Show. She also wrote and illustrated several children's books which were featured on Reading Rainbow and received a Junior Literary Guild Award. M.K. Brown's cartoons have been reproduced in dozens of collections over the years, from Twisted Sisters, collection of Batgirl art, to the New Yorker's 75th anniversary collection. Her own collection of cartoons, Stranger Than Life, is available from Fantagraphics and better bookstores. Recently, she's been at work on cartoons for the third issue of the new magazine, The American Bystander. Another project was a short animation called Aliens, about distracted driving, for Ford Motor Company, and produced by J.J. Settlemeyer. It tied for first place with Bill Plimpton in the public service category at the ASIFA/SF summer screening. Her next project is to finish a new website with the help of Stan Jaron in Australia. And now, the Virtual Memories conversation with M.K. Brown. So, the thing that I asked you before we started, you've lived in Fairfax. It's going to be 50 years next year.
Yes, it's 67 we moved here.
Now, I've lived in the same place almost my entire life. What brought you to Fairfax, and what keeps you here?
Our daughter, Hap and I, when I say Hap, that's B. Cleveland. Hap and I lived in North Beach in San Francisco. And our daughter, Kalia, was just about ready to start school. So we looked at some of the schools in the city where we lived, in our neighborhood. And I wasn't really happy with them, and so we decided to move out to Marin. And after looking around a lot, we found this house, and it's over 100 years old. It's just a nice old house, and the school she went to was lovely down on the edge of the watershed.
Did you think you were going to stay in one place?
Here? Oh, yes.
Yeah.
We had, yeah. Oh, yeah, this was home.
Mm-hmm. What brought you to San Francisco initially?
I'm from Connecticut,
Yeah.
and some of my art teachers told me about how wonderful San Francisco was, and you should see it. And so I was traveling in Mexico and decided to come up to San Francisco on my way home. Circuitous route, I know.
I once flew over the North Pole on the way to Shanghai. So, yeah, it turns out, the longest way sometimes is the best. So.
Anyway, when I got to San Francisco, I just loved it, and it really felt good. And
that would have been the mid-'60s?
that was in the early 60s. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I stayed and got a job and painted and was showing in galleries and so on. And then I went back to Connecticut for a little while and met Hap, and we got married and moved back to, because we both loved San Francisco. So that's how I got here.
And how'd you get started in cartooning?
When Kaylee was a little baby in North Beach, I didn't have a studio for painting, and I needed a place to work. And the only kind of work I could do in the house was small and pretty clean, because we just didn't have an extra room. So Hap was then selling to Playboy and lots of other magazines, and I'd always done drawings and kind of nutty drawings, and he encouraged me to try some cartoons, and so I did, and I started selling them to The Realist and to other little San Francisco magazines, and then I made a batch of them and sent them to Playboy, and they bought some, which was fun, nice. When we moved out here, I kept up the cartooning because it was great, and then I have a studio in the back that I can paint and that kind of thing. So I've always done it concurrently, painting and cartooning. Mm. So I love them both. I like to do all kinds of things. So,
are there degrees to which either form informs the other? Do things you get from the painting, feed back into cartooning?
I don't know. They're so separate. Mm-hmm. They're really different. And yet, sometimes I'll be painting, and I get an idea for a cartoon, so I have to write it down quickly, and not stop the painting, but write down the cartoon, and vice versa. So they're very different mediums. It's almost just the medium is different. Mm. They're both very satisfying. I love to paint, I love to cartoon, I like to make things and build clocks and lamps and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, what was your cartooning influence first? Where did you get started? How did you get, from childhood? Who were the strips or artists who were? In
Canada, we went to Canada every summer. And, I'll have a glass of water. There were some cartoons in the local paper in Canada that were great. And I can't remember the name of the cartoonist. But I look forward to those every week. And my family in Canada are good storytellers. They love to laugh and have fun. And let's see, my brothers, I had 3 siblings, and my brothers were very funny too. I forgot the question.
The cartooning influences. Well, what were the cartooning influences and the storytelling ones?
I don't know. I just always loved to read and draw, and we all listened to the radio and drew at night. We were all artists. I mean, we didn't think of ourselves as artists, but we just loved to draw.
This wasn't some Charles Crumb thing where he was like, inflicting cartooning on the rest of the
Yeah.
siblings.
Just, my brothers and I would draw a lot, and my sister also. We all drew different things. My sister would draw fashion, and my brothers would draw things exploding and bombs and war and, that kind of thing. And I drew horses and dogs and people. And we'd listen to the radio and draw at night often. And then as I got older, of course, there was Mad Magazine and different humorous people like, I loved Bob and Ray and Ernie Kovacs and, that wonderful group of people.
Right.
They were fabulous.
Steve Allen used to have a radio show in New York in the afternoons in the mid-'80s, I guess, and Bob and Ray used to he'd just have 2 hours, and it would just be old comedians from the 50s and 60s
Weren't
just
they
coming
wonderful?
in. It was tremendous.
They were wonderful. So,
What explains your sense of humor, I guess, is really the question. Anybody who likes your stuff would
I told you,
we're under a dog attack.
I'm surrounded by terriers.
Which, I can make a terrible joke about, but no, they're not bursting in and knocking over the equipment like with Merrill Marco, so that's okay. But for everybody who enjoys your work has a very difficult time trying to explain the MK Brown sense of humor.
Oh dear.
And what it is. And did you see? Do you have any way of characterizing? Or it's simply, I don't know, I laugh and I figure other people are going to laugh?
Yeah. When I started drawing cartoons and setting them off, I figured if they made me laugh, then they were funny. And if other people didn't like them, then I couldn't help that. And when I first started at Lampoon especially, and got letters from people who really responded, it was so satisfying and really encouraging and nice. I thought, oh, good, I'm not alone. Of course, my brothers and I also had a mutual sense of humor with different magazines, especially Mad. So I knew that I wasn't alone there.
Did any of them keep up with art? Or did they
My
find,
brother, the only remaining sibling is my brother Frank, who lives in Kennebunk, Maine, and he says, not to call him an inventor, but he designs tools, and he draws, and he repairs old cars, and has a collection of Model A's, and wonderful vehicles. And I keep encouraging him to draw again because he's very good.
Yeah.
And he draws a little bit, I think. I'm the only one who really made a career out of it. Yeah.
Was there a sibling rivalry aspect to that at
No,
all? That was one person better than
Oh, no,
to a degree?
no.
Okay.
We impressed each other, I think.
Did you study art? Did you?
Yes, I went to Silvermine Art School, Silvermine Guild School of Art, it used to be called. And also at that same school was Hap, Cleveland, and Spain. You know Spain's work?
Yeah.
Yeah, he went there also. He was in my class, and very small class, small school. Nice, because most of the teachers were artists, and it was really excellent. I got a scholarship to an art school in Mexico. That's when I came around and
Did the loop?
came up to, yeah. And I did a little printmaking at Art Institute in San Francisco. But mainly it's print. Oh, and also I went to New London, a school in New London when I first graduated.
You consider it a real art education, or did you find more from the actual practice?
Oh, of course you find more from just doing it yourself.
I assume, but being a failed artist myself, I figured somebody else must
You
do
are.
it. Failed writer, but it's close to being a failed artist. You mentioned going into cartooning because of the physical constraints of raising a child. What was the balance, I guess, of motherhood and career for you?
It was a little tough for a few years.
Yeah.
Yeah. But of course she had to come first. for those years. So I did other things, I kind of went underground with I made patchwork quilts, really beautiful ones.
Yeah.
And I built stuff for her. I made her great doll houses, and she's now a fine woodworker, by the way. She makes bowls. She's really quite an artist. We used to worry that she wouldn't be able to find her way in art because she was always very artistic as a little kid. Because around our house we had paintings and cartoons and all kinds of things. But she found it in this beautiful woodwork she does. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really satisfying. She has a show now in Sebastopol. Oh. Kaelia Kleban. You can see her page, Kaelia Kleban's woodworking page. You can look at some of the bowls she makes.
Yeah, beautiful. I'll put a link to it in the show notes.
Yeah, it's really beautiful.
Was it I ask because when I recorded with Carol Tyler, a lot of the tensions of motherhood while her husband was becoming a famous cartoonist were very evident in her work. Was it the sort of thing that you, this is the constraints, this is what we have to work with,
Yeah.
Without saying you resented your family or anything.
No,
was there a degree of
it was hard. He wasn't Hap wasn't very helpful around the house, so I ended up doing everything. But somehow we got through those years. I used to, I don't know if I should say this, but...
You can decide afterwards if like you said.
We had this one big room that was our bedroom and had lovely big walls. And I used to put up my paintings there and work. But it was difficult because he was nocturnal. I mean, he would work at night and sleep in the daytime. So I would cover him up with plastic. And he would sleep through it, and I would try to work on these paintings. Wow. About 4 feet from the bed, and here he is. I didn't want to get paint on him, or on the bed,
Yeah. Secondary issue, but yeah. I always wonder about two artist households. Two writer households tend to be really bad because writing is so sublimating confessional, issues of your life. But two artists, Mimi and Wayne make it work, but
it was the only way I could think of handling it at that time. But
literally just
but
covering
but
it.
Kaylee would wake up too, and I would only be able to paint when she's napping or something because she'd be running all over, and I was showing in galleries several galleries in the city at the time, so I really wanted to keep that connection going. And in fact, one of the low points was when I showed several big paintings to the museum, modern art. He said, "I'll give you a show if you can bring in 25 more of these." And I went home and I was just really despondent because I knew I couldn't do it. Mm-hmm. I couldn't do it in those situations, It would be too much, and I wouldn't be able to take care of Kaelia that well and make dinners and everything. So that was a hard low point, but...
and yet it was an affirmation of your work.
Yes, it was.
But a sense of what you had to give up.
But then I couldn't take advantage of it. I couldn't do it. But we had a lot of fun too, and kind of got through those years. And then when Kaelia, we moved out here, and she was able to go to school, and I got a studio. It was great. And I still continued cartooning then, of course. Mm-hmm. So.
Which I came across the book, I guess, 2 years ago at the at MoCA in New York City. The Fantagraphics guys, you got to pick up the book with M.K. Brown, and that was my moment of, oh my God, I used to read her stuff in the National Lampoon when I was far too young to be reading National Lampoon. What was the process like for you putting together a 44-year collection of comics? Given that you also did some exhibition, you did an exhibition related to it. How did that process differ from the, organizing it for a book as opposed to organizing for an exhibition?
Well, the show at the Cartoon Art Museum, you mean?
Yeah.
We picked, or I pretty much selected my favorite ones to show on originals that really come out well, that look good. Because they're all pretty large in watercolors. They look really different from the way they are when they're printed in a way. It was fun. It was great. It was really fun. Everybody at that museum was terrific. That was the book. Doing the book was quite an effort.
Yeah. How so?
Well, assembling everything, and
Did you have the horrors of looking back at your early work or anything, or was it
No.
just the labor of
no, just
collecting?
trying to. Actually, the hardest part was putting it into categories. There wasn't a way to categorize things.
And doing it chronologically just wouldn't have.
No, you'd have a real mishmash of things because I was doing things, single panels for the New Yorker and strips for the Lampoon. Oh, you just couldn't show them that way. So I put them in my own generic categories of house people and at the workplace. And, I've forgotten what else, romance and, just what it was.
Science and technology.
Yes.
A seedy part of town.
That's
Always
right.
a good one.
That's where the other stuff went.
And Way Out West, which has your great
Yeah.
Western strip in it. Did you see a through line as you started, again, or trying to organize all that work? I mean, besides coming up with those categories, did you learn anything about what you had done over those years?
I was sort of astounded with the amount of stuff I had, because I have a lot of the originals. I've saved most of the originals.
Oh, wow.
I wanted to have that show, and so now I'm deciding about what I'm going to do.
There's always the Billy Ireland Museum. You can always, the museum out in Columbus, the Billy Ireland. So I'm just saying, if you were looking to donate to...
No,
a
I would
place,
like to have a kind of traveling show or something, because it was fun. It really looked...
Yeah.
I felt very good about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, let me ask, actually, when I told past guests who were cartoonists that I was going to record with you, there was a degree of... oh my God, I don't have any questions for her, but tell her how much her work has meant to me
Oh, my.
over the years. Yeah, and more of that than I've gotten with any other
my
guest like this. What was the response to the exhibition that you did, and how do you see your relationship to other cartoonists, and necessarily maybe influences or just people you've interacted with?
Gosh.
Where do you see yourself in the cartooning continuum, I guess?
I would have a hard time putting myself in there in some way, or we're all so different,
Yeah.
We're all so different.
I mean, you have an intro and an afterword in the book by Bill Griffith and Roz Chast, both of whom their work looks nothing like yours.
No.
And yet in spirit, especially with you and Roz in the suburban milieu and you and Bill in the surrealist
I know.
mold. There are commonalities, but, you seem very unique, I guess.
But aren't we all? And
I like to think
cartoon-
we all are, but everybody
Yeah.
tells me I'm just a hack, so I don't really know.
Oh, God.
I kid.
I know.
But yeah, do you see where you fit, I guess? I mean, was there at least a sense within the San Francisco underground scene, which again, I don't see you in I know you're part of the Twisted Sisters group,
I'm
but
kind of on the outside of that group.
yeah, so that's what I'm
But it
saying.
was fun to be included in Twisted Sisters and some of the women's comics. I'm in there.
Yeah,
But I was never really an integral part of it.
right.
I don't know why. It just was,
Well, you weren't doing, I'd say, political strips, I guess, in a sense.
No, I've
which
done
lot
a
of
few
them-
political things, but they come in a kind of metaphorical way. That you don't really see them that way at first.
less polemical. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Like one of my favorite political ones is one I'm going to put up again because it seems to apply, which I did about Karl Rove. I think that's where it started. And you may have seen it. I think it's in there in the book. With a woman with her little baby on her lap. And she's saying, someday you're going to be a big pain in the ass.
and the kid just has that old
He
man
looks
angry
like Karl
expression.
Rove. Now
Yeah.
he's starting to look like Trump.
Yeah. Well, listen, that was my Tom Tomorrow thing. I interviewed him right before we all learned that we had to take Trump seriously, where we still thought it was a joke.
Yeah, I
And
know.
at the time, Dan's like, it's not good for me as a political cartoonist to have this around because it's
Yeah.
too easy material. Then he realized a month or so later that, wait a second, this is the collapse of the American experiment.
know. Oh.
Yeah, that's pretty remarkable. Would you say that's a strip? Well, do you have a comic or a strip you're proudest of? And
I'm proudest of?
Yeah, pride is a really terrible thing to
I have some in there that I really like.
the ones that make you happiest, I
more
guess.
than others. Some that are kind of more out on a limb in a way.
And how often do you get the "I don't get it" from people?
Oh,
that's
yeah.
you know.
I don't care about that.
Good.
It doesn't happen that often so much. It used to. Sam Gross once said, "You don't end it with the end or anything. It just sort of finishes."
Yeah, it stops. Yeah, you do a couple of, especially in the Way Out West section, you have multi-page strips.
Yeah, long strips.
Have you looked at doing longer form? Are you interested in doing longer form narrative?
I've thought about a graphic novel, but I don't really like to talk about my personal
That's what I
life
wondered.
that much. I'd rather do it in fictitious characters or something. I thought about doing that, but it doesn't.
You're not going to do one like Bill Griffith about your mother's affair with a cartoonist?
No,
17 years?
Isn't that something?
I'll tell you, I interviewed Bob Sikoriak. He was the very first cartoonist I ever recorded with. And, Bob does those wonderful pastiches of old comics, different comic styles, adapting classic literature.
Oh, yeah.
Like Bazooka Joe doing the Divine
right,
Comedy
that's right.
and Blondie as Paradise Lost. And I asked him if he had a style of his own and a long form he wanted to. Nope. Mm-hmm. I have no interest in self-expression whatsoever.
Yeah.
I don't need to tell my story. I'm like, okay,
Yeah,
that's most every artist is champing at the bit to
I know. But it does come out in another form.
Yeah. And you feel you feel M.K. Brown herself is in these strips.
Oh,
in a
yes,
way.
everyone. Oh, yeah. I identify with all the characters.
Mm-hmm.
Especially
I've noticed because your
Western.
features keep changing and morphing into like the
That's
shape
right.
of Lake Ontario.
Yeah, I've got different characters that come and go, but like the white girl.
Yeah.
I saw her face in a magazine or a newspaper once. She was a congressperson from somewhere in California. And I loved her face, and she reminded me a lot of the women I knew in Connecticut. Mm-hmm. And somehow I started drawing her, and then I started identifying with her. And she was fun to draw and use. And the characters in Western romance were fun, too. I really liked Lolly, and who was always struggling at home, and then Billy's always getting captured by Indians.
Accidentally. It was an honest mistake. Yeah.
Yeah. And sent home, with gifts and things. And you wonder what happened there, know.
Yeah, did you have a thing for Westerns? Or is it just a genre you decided to play with for...
No, I always loved, The Lone Ranger and Westerns like that. And I had a horse here for a long time. But, right, there's a stable just a mile down the road. Mm-hmm. And that's when the Western romance started, because I was at the stable every day. And I rode all of these hills by myself. And
Yeah, see, most people do not take that input and start creating surrealistic Western genre stories. So I think you're selling yourself short on this.
But, I probably most people do this. Whatever I'm involved in seems to come out in the drawings and paintings. So that was pretty natural, to suddenly be drawing horses a lot, because I've always loved horses anyway. But having grown up on a farm, really, in Canada, so I mean half Canada and half Connecticut.
Yeah, what area in Canada?
New Brunswick, just over the coast from Maine, over the river. And spending the whole summer there ever since I was little was great. Great change from Connecticut. And I love animals anyway, so I've always put animals and things in cartoons and paintings.
Yeah, I haven't seen any of your paintings, which I feel bad about. I'm hoping I can
I
sneak
haven't
out
put
later.
them anywhere yet. I mean, they've been in shows and stuff, but I'm working on a website now with a fellow in Australia for some reason.
As one does. Yeah.
Stan Jaron. By the way, the website that people see is so old, the archives, very, very old
Yeah, I
site.
feel bad linking to them. It's one of those, I'm like, well, it's the only website
I
for
know
MK
it.
stuff, so let me just,
There'll be a new one coming. So we're still working on that.
And the fact that the moment somebody sees your stuff, they say, oh, her, no, I know,
True.
But you're working on doing a sort of online gallery for your
Once I get the kind of archives done of the cartoons in a way that's I like, I'd like to do one with paintings, and I'm working on a project now of graphite drawings, not cartoons, that I want to make a video of. And a friend of mine is
like animated or
slightly
okay,
segues from one to another and that kind of thing.
gotcha.
And my friend Bob Bloomberg, who's a 3D photographer, he's somebody you would be really impressed with.
Yeah.
He's going to show me some software that is going to help me, and I can learn some new ways to do what I want to do.
Yeah. How technologically adept are you?
Well, I
You respond to email, which
did
I
all
consider
my-
an achievement. So that's because I've had some guests who literally send a letter to me. So.
I'm pretty swift and online, and I mean I just scanned all the work for the book, but I don't know this animation program, so I want to learn that. Photo Magico, and there's another one.
Yeah, have you ever tried drawing with a tablet
No,
on the
I don't
computer?
like that.
Okay.
I did a piece recently with J.J. Settlemare and an animated piece for Ford about distracted driving. And Bill Plimpton was the other one who did one, and Al Jaffe. The three of us did our own things.
Yeah.
And it was really fun working with J.J., although he's in New York, so we'd never have met, but we've been friends for a long time.
Yeah, do you find that to be the case, living where you do? Even if someone's in San Francisco, they're not going to be like me and say, screw it, I'm renting a car and coming out to see MK. Like, do you find you have more unreal friends than real life?
Yeah, now that you've got the internet, but I've got a lot of friends here too. But there are people that are across the country that I'd love to know, love to meet.
Yeah.
Like Paul and Deborah.
Oh, yeah. My pal, Paul DeFilippo, he was, oh, my God, it's so wonderful that you're going to meet him. I'm like, yeah, when did you guys become friends? Well, I sent her a letter, but we've never actually met in person.
I know.
Okay. That's
I know. It's
that's sort of why I do this instead of, doing it by Skype or phone or something. I like the immediacy.
I know it. I will meet them someday. I just have that feeling because I'm going back to Canada this fall with my daughter. But I doubt if we'll be able to go up to Rhode Island. But anyway.
But do you get out from here? Do you do much traveling?
Oh, not a whole lot. No, just locally, and I go back east a lot and to see friends in Connecticut and New York, and I haven't been to New York in years. But
It's the same. Don't worry.
I want to see Brian McConaughey again and Sam Gross and people like that who were there. Brian's a wonderful guy.
And they're both your editors at the National Lampoon,
Yeah.
which, as we said, was the my entree into your work.
Yeah.
What was your entree into National Lampoon? What was it like discovering there was a magazine that was?
Oh, yeah, it was
That
very
big.
exciting because I'd been in Playboy for a couple of years, I guess. And it was hard, I really didn't fit there. My cartoons were not sexy. They were just silly, kind of, and there's a limit to how many of those they want to have in the magazine. Sure. So Hap came home one day with I think the first or second issue of the Lampoon. And he said, look at this, and we both looked at it and I thought, yeah, that's a magazine that would fit me, that I could fit into. It wouldn't fit me, I could fit it. And so I sent them a batch and they bought, I think, almost every one. And that was a great start.
Did you feel a sense of a community with the other artists who were in it, or was it more just everybody was sending in?
I did. The editors were funny and smart, and I just loved what they were writing, and they were very wry and intelligent. So it just felt good. And it wasn't, well, it was very misogynist in a way, how the Lampoon was.
Yeah,
but,
well,
I grew
it
up with
was a
older
time.
brothers. I could deal with that.
Yeah.
I didn't take it personally. It was kind of funny, in fact.
Yeah, do you think comedy's or humor has changed in that respect?
Gosh, I'm probably not a good judge of that, but...
Are there jokes you couldn't make now that you could make back then?
Oh, it's getting more conservative, don't you think?
But I'm not officially not a humorist, so,
There are things I would never want to draw now that I probably felt fine about drawing then. Well, a lot of the things that were in the Lampoon you could never do now. Mm-hmm. Ever. Have you seen Drunk, Stone, Brilliant, Dead, that book?
I have a copy of it at home, and I haven't started it yet, not
Yeah.
realizing that you're probably in there, and I should have, done
but
my
you
research.
can see some of the things that were...
Yeah. Oh, there were again, I was, I would have been reading it in 79, 80, 81, which is, again, a little bit after the original horrific days, but still pretty horrific, I guess.
Yeah, they went through some difficult years.
Yeah, but it's humor. I mean, I look at something like Blazing Saddles.
Yeah. Right. That's
still one
right.
of the funniest movies ever made. You couldn't make that
No, you couldn't,
today.
could you?
There's just no way you could get away with
No, you couldn't.
that humor. Do you find again things that you would find funny that you might not want to put into a strip or a
Oh, yeah. Oh,
okay.
of course.
Okay, just making sure. That's
Yeah.
you don't have to say them.
I
out
do
loud.
edit myself. I have a stash of those, though, that I make just for myself.
Oh, really?
Because
Oh, wow.
Because unprintables, that are... I've forgotten what I called that stash. It was gross or something. I can't remember what I called it, but I have a little folder of things that I could never print, but you just have to get them out. They're funny, too.
Have you scanned them or anything, or are they just
No,
paper at this
no.
point? You keep it that way,
Keep it
because if
on
you scan
paper.
them, someday they're going to show up. Someone will hack your machine.
You're not kidding.
Yeah, but I would really, really love to see those, of course, because it's always the things we, are a little embarrassed about finding funny that are funniest.
I know it.
Yeah, what do you find funny? And this, listen, the only other guest I asked this of was Roz Chast, and she was unable to answer the question because she was doubled over laughing, trying to explain how on the internet these presentations of tofurkey that are made to people think they look like real food. Yeah, she couldn't breathe. She was laughing so hard trying to
funny.
explain this to me. But what do you what makes you laugh? What do you find funny?
Oh, my.
And don't say tofurkey.
You're not talking about performers or
It
cartoons?
can be, but just generally in life, are there things that particularly
God,
knock you out?
I don't know if I could say anything in particular. Just the
Or is there something you look
the
for online
oddities
that always gets
happen.
you?
I made myself laugh a couple of weeks ago in a strange situation where I had blocked traffic with my car in Fairfax, and I pulled into the intersection at the wrong time, and then suddenly the light went, and so the car coming toward me ended up parked right beside me, and he couldn't get any farther along. Mm-hmm. And his window was down. He had a long red sports car. He and his wife were sitting in his car, and my window was down. So we were about a couple of feet apart, and he was fuming. He was just fuming that I had blocked traffic. And I was embarrassed and everything that I had done that. And I looked at him and I said, "Oh, God, isn't it awful? It's terrible." And he didn't know what to do, and he got madder and madder. And I commiserated with him all the more until the light went. I said, "Oh, it's really awful. It's just terrible. It's terrible." And his wife was confused too. She was trying to It was somehow it just got me laughing so much I could hardly drive. And finally, the traffic went, and he went on his way just mad as hell.
And I was the guy's afternoon. That's great.
I was laughing so hard. Oh God.
Yeah, are you any sort of fixture here in this town? Do people know? Oh God, that's that crazy cartoonist, or
No, but I was in the IJ, the Independent Journal, a few months ago about it was an interview with somebody, and so that was nice.
But otherwise, you can pass, anonymously through
Oh, yeah.
town. That's
No.
because in the early days, of course, M.K. Brown, in our sexist world, we assume was
Oh,
male.
that's right, yeah.
Was there a degree of trying to establish that gender neutral name / identity back
I
then?
did start that on purpose.
Yeah.
In art school. When I would send out paintings to juried shows. And I found that when I used Mary Kathleen Brown, I wasn't selected as often as when I just was neutral MK, and it changed immediately. And so I just thought, well, just keep that up. And I did.
Have you seen any, when we talk about, how humor has changed over the decades, the way female cartoonists are treated, I guess? Or are you pretty much, again, in your own world as far as the community goes?
I'm glad to see there's a lot more activity with younger cartoonists, women cartoonists. Because it's a wonderful medium to express yourself and say whatever you want, politically or personally or whatever. My neighbor Tessa Brunton is a young cartoonist who does work that I really like, and she's very out on a limb too. I like to see that.
Mm-hmm. Do you do any teaching?
I have a little bit, but not really, not recently. Mm-hmm. I used to go around. I did children's books. I've got a bunch of children's books, and I used to go around to the schools and draw with kids, which was a lot of fun. They would tell me what to draw, and I would draw it, and it was really fun.
Did it look like what they were telling you to draw, or did you just confuse them with...
No, I drew as close to what they wanted as I possibly could.
And the only reason I mention this, in case anyone who doesn't know MK's work is wondering if I'm being mean, is because her figures can kind of morph into... surrealistic,
No, I did try to draw just exactly what they wanted.
No, this is what you wanted, kid. Look.
That's the way it looks.
Yeah, where did the surrealist vibe kind of infect you? Or is that just, again, something that's always been there? You just kind of...
I don't know.
Reality's always been a little amorphous to you?
Yeah. Well, it is, really.
Yeah.
It's kind of... Reality seems to be what we all agree on. There's so much out there that we don't really...
Well, that was my interaction with Jim Woodring, where everything sounded completely normal, and then he made like one slight comment that I realized, oh, you see another dimension the rest of us don't see. Okay, that's why you're able to make the art that you make, and the rest of us are, earthbound.
Right.
So,
right.
It never struck you as an advantage that you see this kind of jelly-like world.
That's reality.
Yeah.
That there are many dimensions that we're not able to see or hear. In fact, that's kind of the thesis of my new project that I'm doing.
Is that something you could talk about?
The
graphite
portals. The one of the graphites.
Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to say in that. Mm-hmm. I just realized, a few days ago.
I was hoping it was just now. Rats.
No, it wasn't.
I feel like I did something to midwife this art.
I got to go work on it right now.
I'm out of here. But you felt that was what you're...
Yeah. Because especially if you start looking through a microscope, you can just get lost, or in a fish pond, or at a leaf or something. There's so much we're not aware of, and then you go the other way, and so it's almost as though we're all agreeing that this is reality here. We that's that and that's that, but it's all a process, and it's so interesting. And I guess it applies to humor too. Not everybody thinks what I think is funny. So we just agree, on that.
There's just the standard reply of "I don't get it," which is and there are a couple of those in the collection, which I figure are my failing and not yours. But because far more often than not, you can. Find a lot to make fun of, or a lot to get humor out of. What influence did Kleben have, your husband have, on your cartooning early on? Because some of the panels that are in here, nothing's dated in the book.
No.
some of them in the scratchiness and hatching, they feel like a Kleban drawing. But but I realized at the time that I don't know the chronology of his stuff, and you could have been influencing him.
Well, I think it was that way.
Yeah.
Because when we first met and we were looking at each other's work, which was one of the most fun we had, sitting down after we'd done our work, for days in secret. And then we'd sit down and he would start peeling off these cartoons and we would just roar. And then I would show him my new stuff and we would laugh our heads off. It was really fun. Mm-hmm. And we realized over the years that there was a kind of cross-pollination going on with his work became more detailed, like mine, and mine became more I don't know how to describe it, but
I say sketchier or scratchier.
No, his were clearer in the outline or the simplicity of it, and so mine became a little more structured drawing, and his became a little bit more cross-hatched and that kind of thing. It was good. It was good for both of us. Yeah. It was interesting. Because
I realized making the assumption that your work was being influenced by his is one of those horrendously sexist things that I really need to get over. And I thought maybe they kind of fed off of each other, and because I don't know. Yeah. I think one of the big injustices is that we don't have a stranger than life of his work at this point. But
of course, there's a lot of small books.
Yeah, which I grew up on as a cat freak when I was a kid too. So that's
wonderful,
just kind of fed into it.
Work.
Yeah. What was it like seeing the success that he was having with that particular form? Were there, and again, areas you would have wanted to see him go into with cartooning, or did you realize this was
when he had a good,
when he
sold
this was
a bunch.
As good as it was going to get, and we should really.
It was great. It was great to see him sell his work, and he worked very hard on it. And every morning, I have this collection too. Someday I'll show you. Every morning I would get up and there would be cartoons on the kitchen table of what he had done that night. I see this little stack of cartoons. I say, oh, good, he had a good night. And on the top would be...
all work and no play makes Jack a dull... Oh, I'm just kidding.
On the top would be the one that says when to wake him up. And it was like the wake-up calls. And I've got all of those, and they're just... Oh, wow. They're just wonderful. And he drew us both, as I'm the one in the brown and white shoes with a ponytail and stuff, and he was a caveman, and he would draw a wake-up call on this. So I would wake him up at 11 or 10 or whatever. They're wonderful. I'll show you sometime. So, yeah, I don't know. Where were we?
Just the free-form conversation that constitutes my life. Besides the graphite work, what else are you working on?
I'm working on paintings in the studio. Mm-hmm. I have a series of those working on, and I've got a stash of cartoons that I'm that are mulling over in this. This is this clean studio down here.
I was going to say it seems very organized in a way that I didn't expect. So.
Up in the back is where I paint and
the dirty work.
Yeah. So I'm hoping that I'll finish this batch. And in fact, having the American Bystander to submit to makes it different. Now I've got a source, because before there weren't any magazines that were really buying my work anyway.
I think it's been the case for everyone. We've seen a diminishment outside of the New Yorker and a few.
So.
Yeah, what was that? What was that like for you from the 80s onwards as magazines started dropping cartooning in general? How did you respond or adapt?
I think I painted more and I was showing more. It didn't make me unhappy. The Lampoon went through some bad years that I dropped out of the Lampoon for a while because it just got a little bit mean-spirited. Then it pulled itself together again, and I was able to submit some more work to them.
And now in the internet era, it turns out that was actually good-natured compared to the world as we know it.
Yeah, right. New.
But yeah. Because we always think it's the darkest, and then we discover, wow,
Oh,
humanity is
there's
really
darker.
terrible. Yeah.
Yeah.
But again, as the whole magazine landscape changed, you again found yourself working more in the in painting.
Oh, yes. Yeah, definitely. Well, it was silly to do cartoons if there's nowhere to put them, unless you're going to make a book, and that's a long range, project.
Are you looking at another one in addition to the?
Maybe.
Yeah.
Sure. If I have enough that I haven't put in there.
Not that I'm putting any pressure on you. We always have the unpublishable M.K. Brown, your secret stash.
That would probably not do too well these days.
I don't know. You might be surprised by that. So, and also, you're thinking of collecting the Aunt Mary's Kitchen.
That's
work
another
that was
one. Yeah, I've got all of those strips from the Lampoon, the Funny Pages strips, and I have a cookbook that I did with Macmillan that I would like to reprise. And some of the recipes are pretty, need to be changed.
To the metric system?
No, they're using materials that I just don't like anymore.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah, that whole series would be fun to do. I've made a little sketch, like a mock-up book of the Aunt Mary strips, and they're pretty silly. Mm-hmm. And then it'd be fun to have products with the Aunt Mary person, but I don't have time to do all that. I need a manager. So I want to do a pot holders and things like that say, have her picture, she's kind of this curmudgeon person. Have her picture on it, and she's saying, "Don't burn yourself."
I think in this internet era, there's probably a company that can help you do that.
I bet there is. I'd like to find it because I've got a lot of ideas like that, but I don't really. I'd rather go up to the studio and work on new things, and
I think I'll connect you with some people I know.
Oh, good.
Trust me.
Really?
Underappreciated cartoonist, somebody whose work you loved, who people just don't talk about nowadays.
Well, I noticed that Saul Steinberg doesn't get talked about much. Mm-hmm. And he was one of my heroes. He was so brave. He did these gorgeous, beautiful drawings and cartoons and little paintings too. And then in some of his books, he would then have this ugly tree, a sketch he'd done or a cartoon he'd done of this tree that was just horrible. And he would put that in there too. And I'm like, good, that's so good to see that. I admired him a lot. I still do, very, very much.
Had you gotten to meet him?
No.
Is there one cartoonist you wish you'd met? Or would it be him, or is there somebody else?
Thurber and
Then you can go back to the Winsor McKays and everybody else from way back. But
Charles Addams. Oh, yeah. Thurber.
Who is another one who seems like an influence in spirit on some of your work. Adams, I mean.
Yeah. He lived in Connecticut near where I lived when I grew up. Mm-hmm. And there was just something really, exciting about his work.
And demented. Exciting and demented, which,
That's right.
which could be the subtitle instead of Stranger Than Life.
I don't go quite that far, although, well, who knows?
Maybe a little demented. That's okay.
That's true. I'll look at the cover.
And again, this was at I saw it when I was at the MoCA Festival in New York, and I think they had the collection by Rodriguez and a few other
yes,
older works there too. And I'm getting the M.K. Brown book, and I'm heading out.
Yeah, Rodriguez was good too. He was funny.
Now, do you see any again when you collected everything into a book and did the exhibition, an evolution or progress in your work? Did you get better at something?
Oh, definitely. When I put this together, I thought, oh gosh, I'd like to change that, but Yeah.
Well, what did you get better at, do you think?
Probably simplifying a little bit.
How so?
Oh, I know. There are a couple that are just a little bit frivolous, I'd say. One early strip, and yet I still like it. I mean, I put them in anyway because I still like them, but there are some things I would change now. Not many.
Yeah. Which is probably a pretty good way to look back at a
Yeah.
lifetime of work, I
Yeah,
would think.
I think so. Really.
On the strength of that, M.K. Brown, thanks so much for coming on the Virtual Memories Show.
Thank you very much, Gil.
And that was M.K. Brown. Her website's under construction, but you can see the earlier version at www.benway.com/mkbrown. Benway is Benway. Now, Fantagraphics recently published a collection of her work, Stranger Than Life, Comics and Cartoons, 1970 to 2013. And that thing is a goddamn delight. So go order it from your favorite bookstore or comic shop and prepare to have your mind blown. I don't know if I give any indication just how surreal, absurd, and hysterical her work is, but go look it up. Go get the Stranger Than Life collection, and you'll thank me. Also, her daughter Kalia's woodworking page is on Facebook at facebook.com/kkbowls. They're pretty neat, so check that out if you get a chance. Now, after the main conversation, I asked MK, so, who are you reading? If you want to hear her answer to that, you'll need to become a supporter of the Virtual Memories Show so you can get access to our monthly podcast, Fear of a Square Planet. You can do that at patreon.com/VMSpod or at paypal.me/VMSpod. I've got all sorts of goals and goodies in place for supporters of the show, including that podcast, a patron-only blog, series of ebooks, and more. So go to patreon.com/VMSpod and support the art of fine conversation. And if you don't like Patreon, just go to paypal.me/VMSpod and make a donation that way. If you do, you'll get access to the same material through fearofasquareplanet.com. Also, you can drop me an email. I'll send you my mailing address. You can mail me a check. A couple of guys have done that because they don't like the online paying thing. However you do it, I'll get you a password and then get you access to that free content. A special thanks go out to Paul W. Jones, Michael Janizik, Fred Kish, Jonathan Kranz, Andrew Mason, Greg Tanner, Zach Martin, Kyle Peterson, and Ron Slate for going over and above in their support of the Virtual Memories Show. We got the full list of show supporters at chimeraobscura.com/VM. And speaking of crowdfunding, make sure to check out AmericanBystander.org and make a donation to support that great new magazine. And hit the New York Times, look up American Bystander, and check out the piece on them in the July 12th issue. This episode was recorded at M.K. Brown's home in Fairfax, California, and that was part of a pre-trade show trip, so I paid out of pocket for my first night at the hotel, car rental, gas, etc. Airfare was a work expense, but all this other stuff was a podcast payment. So if you want to help defray some of those costs, visit patreon.com/VMSpod or paypal.me/VMSpod. Our music for this episode is Nothing's Gonna Bring Me Down by David Bayerwald, used with permission from the artist. David's got a reunion project going with his great 80s band, David and David, which made the wonderful album Welcome to the Boomtown. You can find out more and support that at facebook.com/DavidandDavidMusic. And that is it for this week's Virtual Memories Show. Thanks so much for listening. I'll be back next week with a conversation either with Arthur Lubau, author of a new biography of Diane Arbus, or with the cartoonist Andrea Sarumi. I'm supposed to record with both of them this week, and I haven't recorded with either one yet, so I'm not going to commit one way or the other. But until next time, you can subscribe to the show and download past episodes at the iTunes Store. You can also find all our episodes and get on our email list at either of our websites, vmspod.com or chimeraobscura.com/VM. You can also follow the Virtual Memories Show on Twitter at VMSpod, on Facebook at facebook.com/virtualmemoriesshow, and at virtualmemoriespodcast.tumblr.com. And if you like this show, please go to iTunes, look up the Virtual Memories Show, and leave a rating and review for this podcast. That'll help us build a bigger audience. And until next time, you've been listening to the Virtual Memories Show. I'm your host, Gil Roth, and you are awesome. Keep it that way.